Hi, this is Deena Thomson, author of Fallen Poppies, and this is chapter 48. And this is the epilogue.
Chapter 48. She is dreaming. Joanna stands beside her bed, looking down at her accusingly. "No," Mara Joy calls out in a distant voice. "It is not my fault." She scrunches up in a tight ball, wrapping herself protectively around her growing belly. Something feels different. Something is not right. A pain ripples across her abdomen, and Mara Joy cries out in pain. Joanna floats out of the room, and Mara Joy lifts her stiff body out of bed to follow. She looks over at Larry's sleeping form and kisses him warmly on the cheek. He smiles as he slumbers, and Mara Joy can't help smiling back at him. "I love you, Larry. I honestly do," she says, holding a hand under her large belly. The churning sensation is getting progressively worse. "Mara Joy," a floating voice calls out. She turns to the sound and follows it, her bare feet lightly touching the ground. Her white gown flows around her legs freely as they follow Joanna's ghostly form down the stairs and out the front door into the calm night. She doesn't know where she is going. All she knows is she must follow. Nothing is more important than trailing after Joanna. "Wait!" she calls out, wincing in pain as she tries to catch up. She can't do it. Joanna is too far ahead, a shimmering white fluttering through the night. Panting, Mara Joy continues to push forward, despite the sharp jabs of pain stabbing through her abdomen. She abruptly stops. There she stands, Joanna, looking down upon her freshly dug grave. Mara Joy forces herself to swallow the hysteria bubbling in her throat. Thick humidity of the night clings to her skin. The tombstones seem to whisper a warning. How had she ended up here? She stands behind Joanna's ghostly form, her hands pressed protectively on her tummy. The pain is persistent and increasing. "Joanna!" Mara Joy lets out a sharp cry as her sister pivots around. Their eyes connect. The air seemed to part, giving Mara Joy a clear view of the ghostly form, almost ethereal in the moon's reflection. She is beautiful. Joanna's face is heavenly, void of anger and hate. Her hair is long and flowing, seemingly floating around her angelic features. She reaches out loving hands to Mara Joy's tortured figure, welcoming her. Mara Joy drops to her knees, clutching her stomach as silent sobs rack her body, her insides twisting in agony. "I didn't want you to die," she cries, rocking back and forth. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I wish I could take it all back." Joanna reaches out, touching the top of Mara Joy's head. The moment her fingertips brush Mara Joy's damp curls, she feels her distended stomach harden. A sharp pop gurgles from her belly, and her pain instantly disappears. A surge of tingling warmth spreads across her midsection and gently moves up her entire body. She looks down at her white gown. Between her legs, blood is quickly spreading, saturating the fabric red. She touches the dark spot and lifts her bloody fingertips. A panicked sound escapes her lips as she looks to Joanna for help. Joanna seems to float in front of Mara Joy, her hair cascading around her soft face. A gentle warmth radiates from her ethereal presence as she looks down at Mara Joy with a sense of peace. She extends her hand as if in invitation, her serene voice soothing Mara Joy's fears with a single phrase. "Don't be afraid, sister." The light that surrounds Joanna seems to pulse softly in time with Mara Joy's heart, beckoning her. Marjoy takes a gulp of fresh air and feels free of pain, free of anguish and hate and anger as she takes Joanna's airy hand in hers. She rises to her feet easily, as though she is weightless, and stands equally with Joanna, both looking into each other's eyes without trepidation or hostility. "Why are you here?" she asks in a faraway voice. She feels weightless, the pain she was feeling forgotten. "For you," Joanna says and turns them both toward a bright light. Her lips curl into a welcoming smile of love. Their hands clasp together, blending into one as they walk into the gentle illumination before them. Her body was found the next morning. The groundskeeper, passing the row of headstones, spotted a still shape on top of Joanna's grave. He quickened his pace and saw Marjoy's pale skin dappled with dew and her dark hair spilling over her face. She was curled up in a fetal position. A single red flower rested in her lifeless hand, its petals already wilting. The cause of death was hemorrhaging due to the placenta covering the cervix. The baby had become heavy as it grew larger and placed too much pressure on the incompetent cervix, causing Marjoy to rupture and bleed to death. How she had ended up on Joanna's grave, no one knew. All that was known was Marjoy had died with a smile on her face and a peaceful expression that no one had ever seen on her before. JoBeth and Alan, along with their remaining children and their extended families, buried Marjoy beside Joanna. It seemed appropriate that the two women spend eternity together. Even though they didn't know what had transpired the night Marjoy had died, they knew some truce had been made in the war between the two sisters. JoBeth planted flowers on her daughters' graves that spring. She used the seeds she had once salvaged from another grave so long ago. When she visited, she felt peace in her heart as she weeded the tiny buds that seemed to bloom so quickly from the rich soil that held her daughters. By summer, the flowers were in full bloom, and the two grave sites were alive with vivid color. Pauline, back for a visit from Africa, examined the red flowers carpeting the two graves. She stood up from her crouched position and dusted off her trousers. "Mom, why these flowers?" she asked JoBeth, who stood silently watching Pauline. "It was the flower Marjoy held in her hand the night she..." She stopped, placing her knuckles on her quivering lips, remembering two other graves from another time. It seemed right. Pauline nodded and hooked her arm in the crook of her mother's. "Let's go home to Dad," she said affectionately. JoBeth nodded her approval and began to walk toward the car parked at the front of the churchyard. They were just about to leave the cemetery when JoBeth stopped Pauline with a light touch on her arm. She looked back at the two resting places. A sea of red immediately caught her eye, signifying Marjoy and Joanna's permanent home. She breathed in, allowing the scents around them to penetrate her thoughts. Peace washed over her. The wars of the past were finally over. She knew it because Marjoy had told her. Why else would she have the red flower clutched in her hand on her sister's grave? The very flower JoBeth had retrieved and saved for all these years. She had never planted the tiny gems held captive in the dried head. Not once did it feel right to do so. She had waited for the right place and the right time. It was over. The war was over. "What is it, Mom? What's the matter?" Pauline looked at her mother, concern written plainly on her face. JoBeth panted Pauline's hand lovingly. "Everything will be fine, dear," she said with sincerity. "Everything will be fine." Epilogue. The little girl stood still, hidden from the two women standing at the grave, watching and waiting for them to leave. The cool wind blew, tossing the blonde curls around her head, making her shiver. Rubbing her bare arms with her dirty hands, she felt her patience running out. "Go away," she said under her breath, feeling her cheeks pulse as her lips pursed into a scowl. "Go away!" The trees in the distance swayed, their leaves rustling unsettled, just like the girl. A brittle dry leaf tossed in the wind. The two women stood up, linking their arms together, slowly making their way toward the parking lot. The girl watched them go, her shoulders sagging in relief. It was about time. The older woman stopped, turning to look back from where she had been, a look of longing and resolution on her face. Pausing, standing still in a sea of little flowers, she looked like a beacon, rooted like a tree, the center of it all. "For Christ's sake, leave now!" The words saturated her brain, soaking her little body with anxiety and something more, something she didn't want to think about. Not today. No, not here. She squeezed her eyes shut, wishing the images of her nightmare to go away, breathing in and out through her nostrils. Her fists covered her ears, blocking out the sounds around her as she begins to rock on the soles of her shoes. Back and forth, she begins to hum, its tune vibrating through her ears, tickling her, drowning out all the sounds, erasing the images of the nightmare. A car's engine roars to life, shattering the drowning silence. She freezes, her entire body tensing at the sudden intrusion. Her eyes flutter open to a world of blinding sunlight. Refusing to squint, she opens her eyes wider, allowing the black dots of the sun to dance and weave in front of her. The women are gone. Instantly, she bolts into action, running with abandonment down into the field through the red flowers that try to trip her, slowing her down until she is there, her destination. Breathing hard, her chest heaving up and down with each breath, she stares at the two stones shooting up from the ground. She made it. She's here. Sighing, she bends down, fingering the red flowers rising from her mother's grave. "Jenna, for Christ's sake, go now before your mother bleeds to death." "No!" Her fists once again cover her ears, trying to crush out the sounds of her father's words. "No, no, no!" Jenna rocks, her eyes unable to turn from the words written on her mother's tombstone. Joanna Willis, loving wife, daughter, and mother. Her mother. "Mommy!" Her voice calls out. No one answers back. Her fingers dig into the black soil, ripping out a handful of the flowers littering her mother's grave. She squeezes her hand shut, and then opens it, allowing the petals to fall between her fingers. Each crushed flower, dripping like tears to the ground they came from. When her hand is empty, she does it again and again until the sounds of her father's words start to retreat to the dark corners of her mind. For now. Rising from the field, she begins to walk, the fallen poppies leaving a blood-red trail behind her.